Work-life balance is a modern-day myth, the way that most people understand it today. We seem to believe that there's this magical formula to it. People want to say that it should be balanced. Work should be 50% of the time. Personal life should be 50% of the time. But what they don't understand is that model is really a myth. Most people out there already are getting at least that 50% being personal time. And yet they still think that their occupation takes more than their personal time. The largest dragon we have to slay in this arena is simply ourselves. Work-life balance is within our reach if we simply reach out and grab it. Now, I have a great podcast here teed up for you today that's going to help you break through that ceiling of the work-life balance.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Guys, I've been around the block quite a few times in my life, going on 50 years old, so I've had a couple laps around the sun. And during that time, I've had some hard times, but I've also enjoyed some really damn good times. Over the last decade of my life, though, I know I'm kind of a slow learner. Over the last decade, I feel like I'm getting it figured out. So much so that people ask me, Steve, how do you do it? You have a taxing job, you run this podcast, you have a large family, you run business outside of your daytime work, and you still have the capacity for all your interests. Now, I don't know if that's all the way true, but that's what people see on the outside. And then they go on to ask, how do I juggle all these things and still enjoy life? And yeah, I'm getting a little bit gray, but I still feel pretty youthful. I do enjoy my life. I look better than most of my peers at my age. I'm not as wrinkled. I'm not as downtrodden. I'm enjoying life. Now, my answer to that is that I've really scrapped the traditional way of thinking about work-life balance, and I've created my own thoughts about it. So Stephen Covey says the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. And we're going to get into that here in a minute. Before we get into how you can attain work-life balance, let's talk about some of those challenges that we have, why we can't attain work-life balance. First one is blurry boundaries. All right. So I'm going to clump together a few things here around blurry boundaries. The first one is technology as a whole. When we're at home, when we're at work, the phone dings, we have a new email or a text. Our brain locks in automatically. We quickly look. We got to scroll and look at this damn device to see if it's something important. And most of the time it's not. But we're there anyways. We're looking at this text. We're looking at this email. So we look and we respond to it, showing the other person that we're on demand at any given time. But now our minds are locked into work, and we look at the other texts. We look at the other emails. And this happens to us at work. It happens to us at home. You know, at work, our spouse might text us. Our kids might text us. Our friends might text us. Or at home, it might be work that's communicating with us. Or our friends in the midst of why we're trying to have family time. And then there's the methods of communication. So there's 1,000 different ways we communicate in today's age. And I carry a myriad of different communication devices with me every time that I travel, whether it's to or from work, whether it's to or from another state, whether I'm on work or on pleasure. I always have this myriad of different communication devices with me. I have a work phone, which really is emails, text, phone calls. I have a personal business phone. Same thing, emails, text, calls. But now I introduce social media, the podcast, lead generators, all that stuff. My iPad is the same way. It's just a different method of the same types of communication. And then I got my laptop, both my work and my personal business laptops. So all of these things are meant to make our lives easier. But in essence, we have allowed them to complicate our lives with the tones, the vibrations, and everything else that suck our entire attention away from us doing what we should be doing. And that's building relationships. And then there's also the chain of command and communication, right? So we have technology. We have all of those different communications. We have blurry boundaries. And now we're going to talk about chain of command and how we communicate within that chain of command. So there's a problem in the world overall, and that's that when people send an email, or if you're in one of those little text groups, right, everyone gets every communication. There's no chain of command inherently within those communications, although there's an intent to be. Like with email, if there's an email that gets sent out, it's not just to one person in the to field. People use that to field as a catch-all for everybody that they want to see the email. And at that point, by email etiquette, every one of us is responsible to give an answer or an action to that email. And we sit there with constant guilt, no matter whether we're at work or whether we're at home, because we believe that we have to be present at work and home with our friends in the community, all this stuff simultaneously. And we can't do that, so we're filled with guilt. We don't give enough time at home, we believe, so we feel guilty because we're answering all these texts and emails and every blah, 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 everything. And we also feel guilty that when we're at home, that we miss things from our boss or coworkers, and they need something and we're not being responsive to their needs. And then we don't feel in integrity with ourselves because we're neglecting our personal needs. We're neglecting our exercise. We're neglecting our mental wellness. And we do neglect ourselves. And once again, when we allow all of this to eat up our time, we're not living in integrity with ourselves. We end up giving to work, we give to family, and we take it from our own personal well-being. But at the end of the day, we're not truly giving full attention or energy to anything. It's too much. We can't do it. So we only partially give ourselves to everything. And then we have this thought that we have time scarcity, that we don't have enough time to meet all of our priorities, to meet all of our objectives, to meet everything. So let's talk about priorities for a minute. Most people don't even understand what their priorities are. They get told their priorities by someone else. It might be their boss. It might be the CEO. It might be the customer. It might be their spouse. So I'm going to ask you today, if you don't understand your priorities, how the hell can you bitch about priorities? What are your priorities? And then we go on to systems. So one of the things that I've noticed about people is that they have a lack of systems in their life. And that leads to time scarcity as well. Most people lack these systems that can make them more productive. And there's thousands of them out there, right? I run a hybrid of my own, but there's bullet journaling, there's getting things done, there's all these different methods of productivity that people don't understand or they don't use or whatever. Or they have a system for work, right? They use a system at work. They're good at prioritizing. They're good at getting things done. But they don't utilize a system at home or in the other parts of their life away from work. And then once again, they don't hold this standard in those areas of life. And what it ends up looking like is it looks like to our family and friends that we don't prioritize them because they know how successful we are at work. Why can't we be like that at home and with them? And then there's also just a ton of what I call time sucks. There are things out there today. There's social media, there's games, there's food, there's drink, there's pornography, there's all these things. And they're all designed for one common purpose, and that's to boost our dopamine to keep you addicted to the thing. And all of those things are negative. But we as people, we need to get that hit of dopamine. And it's a quick, easy shot that we can take. Now I see this. We can't even have a 30-minute meeting in anywhere in this damn country without someone picking up their damn cell phone and checking their text or checking their social media or whatever. I see men sitting with their families at restaurants, and it pisses me off. They pick up that cell phone and they're on it the entire time that they're supposed to be eating dinner with their family. I see friend groups go out. I see friends go out. And I don't even know how the hell they're friends because every one of them is on a damn device. I talked about the unicorn of the 50-50 work-life balance earlier. And I'm going to say it again. It's a total mythical creature, just like a damn unicorn. But work-life balance is not achievable. But we can't look at it the same way because it's not working. We have to look at it differently. So let's redefine work-life balance. Hell, let's rename it today. And let's call it work-life intentionality. So why should we call it work-life intentionality over work-life balance? Well, let me give you some examples. Because sometimes that new business you're getting off the ground will require more attention. Sometimes your daughter, at some point, your daughter might have a cheer competition, or your son might want to go traveling for baseball or whatever the case is. And you need to put time in for that, PTO at your workplace. And you need to put that aside and put your personal ambitions to the side to make sure that you're supporting your son or daughter in those endeavors. Do I want to go to a cheer competition and spend my life there for a week? Absolutely not. But if it's important to my daughter, you damn sure bet I'm going to be there. And then there's sometimes that your family well-being is just simply more important than the job that you currently have. And it might take you down a different road. Or let's say that you have a friend whose father just passed away, and you need to put some of your ambitions on the side so that you can be with your friend to console him during the hard time of losing his father. All of these things take intentionality to make the right choice on where to spend your time. It takes knowing what you want out of life and what you're willing to risk or endure to get there. If you don't know all of this stuff, if you don't know what you want out of life, you don't know what you're willing to risk, then you can be pushed around. Work can push you around, and these things that should be important to you lack their importance because you have not put the intentionality behind it. So in this next segment, let's figure out what that looks like, and let's do that together. We're going to talk about a lot of different items in here, but I want to just recap for a second. We're talking about three things. We're talking about blurry boundaries, we're talking about guilt, and we're talking about time scarcity. So let me jump right in. Blurry boundaries. This is something that I personally struggle with more than the rest of these things. Now, just to recap, I'm the top level leader in my plant. I have a lot of irons in the fire, both with this podcast as well as some outside endeavors. I have family, I have grandkids, I have kids, I have a wife. I do a lot out in the community. But let's start off with some of those things that are really blurry boundary areas, right? And a lot of these, like I said, I struggle with. The first one is the technology that's around us, right? We have become slaves to these machines, but we don't have to be. There are plenty of built-in functions that we can dial in on these machines. There's do not disturb functions. There's vibration over using a ringtone. There's VIP lists. There's automatic replies. If you don't know how to use these things in your technology, figure it out. You're going to love it. But beyond that, and most of all, we have to put in boundaries with ourselves. And what I mean by that is that we can't allow these things to be our masters. We must be their masters. It's not meant to be like this, people. And then when we get into the communication methods of these boundaries, we got to break that down a bit. We have phone calls, we have emails, we have text, we have social media. All these things give us notifications. All these things, right? YouTube, Netflix, it doesn't matter. All these things give us notifications. We have to figure out the boundaries that we have with these. And that's going to be dependent on our personal situation, our businesses, or what have you. Now, here's mine. I'm just going to share that with you. And I'm going to talk about the three primary forms of communication that I have. First one is phone calls. So with phone calls, I'm going to pick that sucker up. All right? If it's someone from work when I'm at home, I'm going to pick it up. Because if you call me, it means that you need urgent attention. Now, the same goes for my wife. If my wife calls while I'm at work, I'm going to pick it up because I believe that it's urgent. Second one is text. To me, text, and what I've communicated to people is that I will respond the next time that I'm checking my text. That's on my schedule, not on anybody else's. That's on my schedule. And then the third way is emails. Emails, to me are simply, I will get back with you in the next 24 hours if my name is in the to spot. Emails aren't used for urgency in my world. So we have to create our boundaries. Once that we figure out where our boundaries are, we need to communicate those out to those people that are affected by the boundaries. And then we simply have to live by them. Now, people outside of the list of who you commonly respond to or you commonly communicate with, I should say, if it's outside of work, outside of your family, outside of your community responsibilities, outside of your businesses, whatever. People outside of that list, outside of those people that you need to communicate with, they can live in voicemail and email boxes. You don't have to respond to those at all or right away. Now, if you believe that you have to respond to them, have a method for those external people that gives a legitimate time span. Now, the people that you have communicated to, your family, your work, your customers, whatever, most of those people will respect those boundaries once that they're communicated with. I have never had an issue when I've communicated them properly. Which brings us to the next section of this blurry boundary portion, and that's chain of command with communications. So I want you to define in your organization of family, in your organization of community, workplace, business, I don't care what. Define in your organization who should be getting what kind of communication and who they are intended for. For example, we have escalation trees at work. I don't know until it hits a certain threshold. Someone below that threshold is responsible for it before it comes to me. It gives them a chance to respond before I'm even involved. We're going to talk about emails for a second, and this is going to be very tactical, but also very necessary. Because this is what it looks like. And it's also going to cut down on confusion because it simply adds clarity to the processes, and it also adds responsibility to the processes. So I get a kick out of emails because people seem to think that they get more brownie points for including more and more people into their to line of an email. I've seen to lines that are 47 people long. And remember, to line means that I need to take action or a response. So let's go over proper email etiquette just to take a look at some of the boundaries that we can put in place. BCC. If you don't know what BCC is, it's blind carbon copy. Nobody else knows that you got that email except for you and the sender. So I also call this the asshole button. If you can't put someone on an email, you simply don't need to send it to that person. The only time that I think BCC is important and it applies is when you're sending out a general email to your customers and you don't want them to obtain each other's addresses. You're trying to protect their identity from a whole bunch of spam emails, basically. So if it's not that, if it's not your customer, right, and you receive one of these emails and you notice that you're blind carbon copied on this, what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at that email carefully because you're probably getting pulled into some sort of shit that you don't want to get pulled into. All right. Now, the CC or carbon copy, this is a spot that you can put a person's name in, a person's email address in for their viewing pleasure. All right. You're not asking that person for an action or response, but you want them to know information. All right, so here's my example for this one. You're going to send this email to HR to give props or give an award to an employee that went above and beyond. This employee might work for a different department, and you simply want that manager of that employee to know so that they can also recognize that employee when they see him. So what you would do is you would put the HR in the to spot, and in the carbon copy, you would put that manager in that spot. And that's just an FYI sort of thing so that you can let that manager know that you saw their employee doing something spectacular. All right, now, if you receive a CC, it simply means that you should look at it and file it away as necessary, but you don't need to respond to it. And then that finally brings me to the to section. And I mentioned this earlier, but this is to be used when you need a response to an email or an action to be taken from that email. Or simply, it's also used as a response back to something that someone previously had asked for a response to. So once again, if you are in the to spot and you receive this email and you're in the to spot, you should send some sort of reply back. Even if it's yes, I understand the task and I will report back when complete. Or confirmed, or your response, or simply to say, hey, excuse me, you put me in the to spot. What do you expect from me from this email? Because when it says to, that means you're expecting an action or a response. But you have to make sure that your organization understands the proper methodology using the to, CC, and BCC fields of that email. And once that you understand that and your organization understands that and people start using it, it makes everyone's lives a ton better because they know the expectation of that email and they can file it appropriately or respond appropriately. And this allows you to be more present at work when you're at work, to be more present at home when you're at home. And then moving on to time scarcity. We talked about priorities before. People do not understand their priorities. They go with the flow. They go with the flow, man. Now, going with the flow is a bunch of shit, right? Figure out your priorities and chase them bastards down, right? And the best way that we can ever understand our priorities is by understanding what we want out of life. You guessed it. I'm going to talk about vision again, right? We need to craft a clear and precise vision of our future. And we need to do that in our careers. We need to do that in our communities. And we definitely need to do that as a family. So does the action that you're going to do right now, does the action of picking up your phone and scrolling on social media align with that vision? Does answering that email right now when you're on family time align with that vision? Does answering the phone when your boss calls, does that align with the vision? If the answer is yes to those questions, if the answer is yes to any one of those questions, you can do it and you can be proud of doing it once that you have this clear vision. If it doesn't, however, if it doesn't align with that vision, you need to understand if it's a stepping stone to the vision or not. Not everything's a direct path. Some things get us to that next step. It might be, I might take this job that's not really aligned with my long-term vision, but what it is aligned with is putting more money in the bank for our retirement later on down the road. And it gets me closer to that long-term vision. It's a stepping stone. But if it truly doesn't have anything to do with your vision, it doesn't have anything to do with being a great dad, a fantastic husband, helping out your communities, choosing that career, starting your own business, whatever the case may be within your vision, you need to ask yourself, why in the hell am I doing it? And you should align every action that you take with that thought pattern. Does this get me closer to the man that I want to be? And then there's systems. A vision is nothing but that. It's somewhere to look out and align yourself with. But you need systems to make that happen. You need systems to capture your goals and objectives and daily motions that keep you moving towards that long-term vision. The daily motion is so important, but you can't do that without the goals, objectives, and vision. But if we want to be lean, we got to eat right every day. That's daily motion. If we want money in the bank to take our family on these extravagant vacations to Italy, we must make the daily decisions that help you save. Those are daily motion activities. If we want a strong relationship with our wives, guess what? It needs to be a priority, and you invest in it. You need to prioritize every part of your life and make non-negotiable items for every segment. And the time sucks have got to stop. We got to kill these time sucks. We have to be the masters of ourselves first. When we get home, we need to put our phone up and respect the boundaries that we've put in place. And we need to practice our own personal boundaries. My biggest temptation is social media. I can get on there and it's scrolling like a hamster wheel. And I need to practice my own boundaries with myself continuously because it's so easy to do. I love those dopamine hits too. But when we do all those things that I just talked about, when we work on the blurry boundaries, when we work on all these things, we don't have to have all that guilt because we align back into our integrity. When we have boundaries and we work to protect them, other people understand and respect us and the boundaries that we have. When we have those boundaries, we're able to fully commit to the time we are in. We're able to fully commit to the personal time, to the family time, to the time out in community, to the work time, to all these different segments. And ultimately, we get more productive in all the areas. The commonly known work-life balance I referred to as a unicorn before, but really it's a joke, to be honest. It's never going to be fulfilling in our lives, but work-life intention, it's achievable. It's something that we can attain, and once that we start to achieve it, it's going to make our lives that much more fulfilling. The goal of work-life balance can be achieved through this work-life intention. Now, let me say that again. The goal of the work-life balance, which means that we're fulfilled in each segment of our lives, can be achieved through work-life intention. Our relationships are going to be stronger. We're going to become more productive. Our friendships will last. Our stress will be less. There are many more hours in a day than what we give it credit for. We just need to learn how to utilize them better. So my call to action for you today is, number one, clear up your boundaries. Then I want you to set your priorities. I want you to give yourself non-negotiables every day, and then start living a better life, a more balanced life. Now, thank you for joining me once again on this episode of the Fire Forge Leader podcast. If you found this discussion valuable, I want you to share it with your network, and then come back and leave me a rating and review. Until next time, I want you to keep forging your path with purpose and passion.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.